personally, you know, it's more for me, you know, and I do look at the student population very carefully. 12 years ago, we had 600 more children than we do today. What causes that? You know, what trends in the market are happening? If you had 3,700 children 12 years ago, does that mean you could have 4,500 in years to come based on the fact that we have more houses today? And, you know, what trends are happening? Are families coming or leaving New Jersey? Because if we did have a crisis from overdevelopment, it would be an over-infrastructure problem within the schools. So that analysis has been done, very aware of it. I would be lying to you if I didn't say it's nerve-wracking every time you okay any sort of community. Because you're asking yourself, is this the right mix? Is it are there rentals? Is it all rental property of low-income property? Is that what we want in Holmdel? What will that look like? How will that feel? Will they fit in? So philosophically, I don't like the concept of having, you know, 150 homes that are all low-income enabled by the government and the effects on the community. So hopefully, when it's finalized, the plan blends into Holmdel the best way possible.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? Ralph.
Hello again, Ralph Blumenthal, 41 Stony Brook Road. Just following up a little bit on what Gene was asking about. Earlier in the year, one or two of you indicated that there would be some more public information on this topic. You hired a PR person to put together some materials on it. We haven't seen anything. Is something coming? What's the status of that? I think it would behoove you to be a little more open. I realize it is a subject of litigation, but to make a little more the public, a larger share of the population, a little more aware of some of the alternatives and get input to you as part of that process. So I think there's a fine line because of the litigation as to what you can and can't say, but I think you'd be better off if you'd be a little more open, not give the answers, but explain some of the options and the kind of thinking that Eric just described as to what's, and you said studies were done. Can we make some of those public?
Ralph, so in answer to your question, we hope at our next meeting we'll have something for you on COAH. So we're that close to being able to present something to you. Hopefully at our next meeting we'll have it. Yeah, and Dr. Pascucci, I believe, mentioned that at your last meeting. I was not here though for that. Yeah. So it should be at our next meeting, in the next month at least.
And Ralph, I asked our COAH attorney the same question, like, can't we just put out some of this information? People are asking, like, what's going on? And he was like, there's so many different moving parts and interveners. He's like, you really don't want to go out there with this information, and you really don't want to share too much just yet. But as how COAH works and how it's involved, you know, that's available, that's public information, but the details of everything, it's been a lot of hard work and a lot of research.
Well, thank you for thinking about it.
Thank you, Ralph. Yes. Yes.
Francine Campus, 2 Country Squire Lane, Holmdel. First of all, I'd like to say I am ecstatic and I appreciate the efforts HYAA to come up with a plan, and it didn't cost us $55,000. And what they're recommending is what should have been recommended a long time ago, because it's been known how much maintenance needed to be done on the existing courts for the children. So I am very appreciative. Thank you. The other thing is this whole thing on COAH within litigation. I appreciate you making that statement tonight, Mayor Tom Critelli, but it's long overdue. People have been questioning this issue, and we've always heard it's in litigation, we can't speak. But all of a sudden tonight, you're able to speak.
Well,
why didn't you have to know? Why didn't he do this earlier?
To clarify, in terms of what was said, the statement was strictly a statement of what was already contained in a court-filed certification. Okay. So there's nothing that's been basically spelled out that really expands upon the statement that was made with the court under oath. And you know, obviously, the statement tonight explains that, but when you're the subject of litigation, you don't want to be litigating your case and showing your side, and this was a legal issue that was before the court earlier. So we're not at the disposal to just come out here and speak
No, but I
about these
think it's
issues.
something that the public needed to know, because for us to have confidence in our township committee and the people that are, making very important decisions for this town. So that, now, the other thing is, it's still, and I hate to say it, we're in litigation because an intervener found something that he doesn't think is right. That's costing the taxpayers money, is it not?
Well, it's paid out of the COAH fund. I mean, obviously,
Okay,
legal
that's-
fees are costs that
That's
are
money
expended,
that
but
we taxpayers are.
every single town in New Jersey
Has
has interveners and is dealing with
Yeah, and just like what an
litigation.
intervener is, an intervener is a developer that may not be included in our COAH plan. So that's basically what these interveners are. It's nothing to do with any other ancillary issues. It's you didn't pick my property, I think you should have, therefore they're an intervener. That's what the interveners are, and that's the litigation that we're all talking about.
Okay, so they can just say, you didn't pick my property for no reason.
Exactly.
Okay, but in any case, I appreciate your statement, I just think it's long overdue.
I try to do what's right all the time. Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? Ken?
Ken G, 8 State Street. Thank you for putting out the statement. I've heard in the last few days about some of these allegations myself, so I decided to do some independent research. First of all, just to follow the point, I think to the extent that we all appreciate that when you're in the middle of litigation, that there's certain things you don't want to share publicly, but to the extent that once they're filed, they're court records, then I think that that changes things and not on your strategy and so on. So to the extent that I actually had to independently get some of the court records and read them myself, I believe some of that should be made publicly available. And it's a follow-up to clarification. I noticed that the interest that the mayor has on the property was sold to a party that is a partner in your law firm. So to the extent that, we don't know what the terms of that contract and what that interest is, but it seems like that doesn't completely eliminate the potential or the appearance of interest. So I think to the extent that the more you can share, and again, we appreciate that you're in the middle of litigation, but to the extent that things are filed with the courts and the public records and things that other people can get to, I would encourage you to share as much as you can. Second, with respect to COAH specifically, it seems that there are a lot of different moving parts and a lot of public interest and input is not sort of gathered because there are properties that were included originally, properties that are not included now, properties that may be included. And to the extent that once those are finalized or proposed and submitted to the court, I would again encourage you to share that with the public. Thank you.
Thank you. I saw a hand in the back, yes.
Good evening, Betty Rauscher, 36 Blue Hills Drive. I just wanted to bring up the swim club again. I know I've heard it brought up many times, but I never hear any plans for it. I went up there today and I couldn't believe what I saw. I mean, I just really was surprised at in what bad shape everything was, and also saw a lot of land up there that I thought maybe we could be doing something with as far as more recreation. Do we have any plans for that?
We looked at the property next to the swim club for a recreation improvements, and there's some serious sloping there, so it didn't really fit this committee's desire to do what we're thinking of doing. So that property was ruled out for now. There's been discussions about a tennis center up there. There's been discussions about a rec center up there, but we haven't had any further detailed conversation about doing anything. We are going to look to make some improvements to the swim club, though. We are very well aware that there needs to be more than just paint and some general maintenance and sprucing up. We really have to look at the swim club hard and make an investment in that if we're going to continue to operate successfully.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other comments from the public? Leah?
Leah Shea of 11 Ladwood Drive. In relation to the statement that you made from COAH, I think that what was lacking is you said you had transferred ownership of the property in 2016 to Hackensack investors. That's owned by your partner. So maybe that should be divulged too. You also bought the property in 2015, but sold it in 2016 or transferred it. That's an entire year that you had that property and were possibly involved in COAH discussions as a committee member. So I don't count that as a rookie mistake. I count that as somebody who was, maybe possibly taking advantage of development. It's just my opinion. I think this is a symptom of a lack of transparency and entitlement that maybe has come to this township committee. I also think to kind of blow off and say that the person or the lawsuit that's being brought against the town is just an intervener and somebody who didn't get their property considered. They spent over $300,000, encouraged by, from what the court papers said, this very township to submit a plan. So I would be kind of upset too if after being encouraged to submit a plan, I incur $300,000 worth of costs to now say my property is being overlooked and not included. I would dig a little bit deeper myself. So I think that needs to be explained a little bit more. And again, I think this goes to a much larger issue of the lack of transparency. And I think too, Dr. Pascucci misspoke when he said that it could be, put out, a presentation could be put before the public. Once it's ruled upon, that's it. There is no presentation. There's no going back again in front of the judge. So I don't understand why he can misspeak.
Can I correct you on that?
Okay, please do.
Yeah, so if there's a settlement of COAH, it'll have to be approved by resolution of the Township Committee. At that point, obviously, the township is going to take a public action, which would explain the terms of the COAH settlement. So it will be...
Right, but we don't have input as to where it can go, how many stories, what it looks like, correct? That's already been decided, right? The proproperties have been decided.
Nothing's been decided right now. Everything is
But the
fluid
properties
right
in
now.
the settlement that's before the judge has been decided upon.
I can't comment on the litigation, but I think that you're making a characterization that the process is much further along than it is, which is not. Obviously, the hope is to tie everything together, but until that's the case, nothing's final.
Okay. I was under a different impression, so that's my statement.
One point of clarification to Leah's statement is, I never bought any property. I never closed on that property.
It's a purchase agreement, it's a settlement
You
agreement.
said that I purchased it.
Then I
so just
misspoke.
want-
It's
yes.
a settlement agreement,
Thank you.
then I misspoke.
Thank you. Anyone else care to speak? Jay?
Jay Nello, 18 Lavender Drive. Mayor Critelli, I appreciate that statement too, but I do find it curious and candidly, I just don't think this passes the smell test that all of a sudden, notwithstanding that you're a developer, you said, oh, I'm going to buy this property along the parkway that's wetlands that no one's wanted for a while, and then a year later flip it to someone when it maybe looked bad and the someone is your partner in the business. This is just unbelievable. And now, because of this situation, while I agree there would be normal developer issues and litigation, this now has multifacets of problems, which is compounding the effect that the public can't have any sort of input on this situation. And Mr. Nicholas, you seem to be kind of the cheerleader for your party lately. Would you agree that, well, you have your son out there putting out Mr. Critelli's sign. Would you agree that Mr. Pascucci, it's kind of curious that he ducked out, was wrong last week, that we really, well, what was he?
He's sick.
Okay.
I'd like you to just take that statement back.
I'll take it back.
As a health issue.
I'll
okay?
take it back.
Thank you.
My apologies. Would you agree that the public really won't have any real input on this? That there may be a resolution to vote, but the public really won't have an input on it?
Absolutely, the public will. When we bring forward the plan, everybody will have their chance to speak on it.
To speak on. But what about having input on the dynamics and the locations and the density? You saw what was going on in Hazlitt.
No.
I'm going to ask legal counsel to answer that.
Can I pause the clock?
Sure, you
Yes.
can pause the clock. Let's just have some perspective here in the fact that the state Supreme Court said we're going to take back ownership of COAH. COAH then became a judicial item again where municipalities had to file with the court asking for a declaratory judgment saying they're immune from builder's remedy suits for the third round. So the Supreme Court basically from up high forced us all into court. So this is not some making of the Township Committee or the county or honestly even the legislature. The court took back ownership of it, which made every town have to go into court. And so if there's any critique of that process, which I think every member of this governing body probably agrees is a horrible process, that's because of the Mount Laurel doctrine and the case law interpreting that and what we're stuck with. It has nothing to do with a lack of transparency from our perspective. We're trying to do everything we can, dealt the hand we are, which is the crazy system of COAH.
I'm focusing on the density and the ability for the public to say, we should be able to buy this down. What is the cost-benefit analysis of buying it down? And from what it looks like, the density on the property that Mayor Critelli once owned or his co-worker owns or colleague owns now is looking for some of the highest density. So, again, this doesn't pass the smell test, and it's really complicating it. What?
How you know some more information?
What?
I'm just worried, how are you aware of the density on any project? This is not a public document.
It's the lawsuit. The lawsuit talks about the density. The lawsuit, that's why. Mike, also, I take personal interest in Barbara's comment because, candidly, I wasn't for her in that election. And I supported you guys because I'm a lifelong Republican.
Yeah.
And your marketing materials from the Republican Party clearly stated in glossy print and in robocalls that the claim of high density is outrageous and that you're not pursuing this. But it actually looks like you are. So would you like to respond from the Republican Party since Mayor
I don't
Critelli can't?
speak, I'm not, this is not the Republican Party, this is the Township Committee.
Okay. I just want you to know as a Republican, it's extremely disturbing that clearly high density, what your party claimed, is a core part of it, obviously, and that is why I'm supporting an independent candidate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? I'm going to ask for a roll call on adjournment. So first I'd like a motion to adjourn. Motion. Second? Roll call, please.
For the very last time.
Yes.
Mr. Nicholas?
Yes.
Mayor Critelli?
Yes.